Venezuela's permanent ambassador to the United Nations has addressed media at the UN to discuss the recent illegal entry of police officers into the Venezuelan Embassy in Washington, D.C. Samuel Moncada began by saying that the provisions of the Vienna Conventions are shattered if the United States opts to violate the integrity of Venezuela's diplomatic offices.
This type of situation should be resolved by appointing third states with protecting powers in order to maintain the integrity of the diplomatic headquarters. Article 45 of the Vienna Convention states that even in cases of severance of diplomatic relations, the receiving state shall be obliged to respect and protect the premises of the mission. This is only possible through respect for the principle of immunity. For otherwise, if a government uses its territory, paid and protected agents to occupy and violate the diplomatic offices of other governments, the provisions of the convention would be shattered, and all diplomatic offices in the world would be in danger.
Ty Berry of the organization Code Pink, and who is a representative of the Embassy Protection Collective, joined Ambassador Moncada and spoke about the process by which the opposition and U.S. authorities attempted to evict the collective.
The other day, they put out a so-called eviction notice with no signature, no seal, no statement of what department this came from. The municipal police, which have no authority in this matter, read out an eviction order saying some guy named Vecchio is telling us that we can't be in a building that we were invited into and have been living there for many months. We reject Vecchio. We reject his call to leave the building. We will stay there until a protective status has been made for the Venezuelan embassy and the police stand down.
And earlier on Wednesday, Reverend Jesse Jackson joined peace activists at the D.C. Embassy to discourage military action in Venezuela. The Reverend successfully delivered 4 bags of supplies to the Embassy Protection Collective, despite resistance from right-wing opposition supporters. Speaking outside the building, Jackson condemned U.S. militarism around the world.
War is expensive and war is futile. We cannot starve Venezuela to submission. We must use aggressive diplomacy, bring both sides to the table, and with the help of the United Nations, figure out a conflict resolution short of violence. Right now, we're on a dangerous course in our own hemisphere. War drums are beating, babies and borders on the U.S. side in Mexico and Texas, Yemen, Iran, Syria, Afghanistan. We must go another of our foreign policies, foreign to our values, and it does not make rational sense.
But despite growing support for the activists protecting the embassy, members of the Venezuelan opposition continue to use violent tactics to stop any supplies from reaching them. Here we can see images of a scuffle breaking out between activists trying to deliver food to the embassy protectors and opposition members trying to stop them. The Embassy Protection Collective has been using a rope and pulley system to bring food in, as they're unable to leave the building due to the constant attacks of the opposition. On top of this, the ropes being used have been continuously cut by the Metropolitan Police and Secret Service agents as was presumably a tactic to isolate the people inside. Nonetheless, their tactics have not managed to drive out the activists who are inside the building at the invitation of the Bolivarian government. The United States Department of Transportation has announced the suspension of all air service to and from Venezuela as part of its newest measures to intensify the blockade. An order issued by the department say that's the right of U.S. air carriers and foreign air carriers to provide transportation to and from Venezuela has been suspended, affecting both commercial and cargo. The communique says that the acting Secretary of Homeland Security has requested this action based on his assessment of current security conditions in Venezuela. And the economic blockade imposed on Venezuela since 2015 has made it difficult for citizens to access medicine and has caused a resurgence of illnesses that were previously controlled. The sanctions have also caused tens of thousands of deaths.
Venezuela has been facing a medicine and food shortage since 2015, caused by the economic sanctions driven by the United States. and formally implemented in 2017.
La banca internacional tiembla cuando ve.
International banks shake when they see a request from Venezuela. They say they cannot work with a Bolivarian republic, not even to assist with the supply of medicines, food, supplies, or vaccines. They say they won't work with us. This is an act of criminal aggression.
In July 2017, Citibank denied Venezuela the funds needed to import 300,000 insulin doses. That impacted 450,000 patients. In October, the Swiss bank blocked resources for vaccines acquired through the Pan American Health Organization that delayed vaccination plans for 4 months.
We have that money to purchase medicines. This violates international law and agreements with the UN. I lay blame at the feet of Donald Trump and Julio Borges, who are responsible for these blockades.
In 2017, Colombia blocked 2 million doses of anti-malaria vaccines. In the same year, the pharmaceutical companies Baxter, Cipher, Novartis and Abbott denied certificates of exportation of medicines for cancer. In May 2018, international banks blocked the payment of $7 million for dialysis supplies. 15,000 patients could have benefited from that treatment for free.
We continue to reinforce our ties with Russia and China in an attempt to mitigate these challenges. But those are alternative mechanisms that take time. As such, problems inevitably arise, but we work hard to solve them.
Pan American Health Organization figures show that 8.5 million children were vaccinated against measles in March 2019. Meanwhile, more than 5 million children between the ages of 7 and 15 were vaccinated against diphtheria. This occurred in spite of the economic sanctions.
Venezuela has recognized the continued support from the Pan American Health Organization, which has allowed us to maintain our vaccination efforts, even with pharmaceutical companies blocking us from getting medicines.
A recent report by the international organization known as the Center for Economic Policy Research has found that 40,000 Venezuelans have died as a result of the sanctions applied since 2017.
U.S. sanctions are deliberately aiming to wreck Venezuela's economy and force a regime change. This is fruitless, heartless, illegal, and failed policy, causing grave harm to the Venezuelan people.
If the blockades do not stop, around 300,000 people will be at risk of dying. This includes people living with AIDS or patients in need of medicine for dialysis, cancer, hypertension, or diabetes.
The Special Jurisdiction for Peace in Colombia has ordered that FARC leader Jesus Santrich be released. The court is in charge of the peace process and has asked the Attorney General's office to set him free immediately. Santrich was facing an extradition request from the United States, which accused him of drug trafficking. The court has found no evidence that would suggest any criminal act on his part and says his extradition should be turned down.
I'd like to thank all of my colleagues and the people who have believed in me, who always believed and who fought for my freedom. The decision of the Special Jurisdiction for Peace has undone the dirty State Department prosecutor's office campaign against me. This is a light of hope and indicates that the path to implementing the peace accord is possible.
The Colombian Attorney General Nestor Humberto Martinez has resigned following the Special Jurisdiction for Peace's decision. During his resignation speech, Martinez attacked the court at length, saying that he couldn't endorse the ruling.
This challenge to public order will not be endorsed in writing. My conscience and devotion to the rule of law don't permit me. That's why I'm announcing my resignation from the position of Attorney General.
President Donald Trump has declared a national emergency that bars U.S. companies from using telecommunications equipment made by firms allegedly posing a national security risk. The move was seen as paving the way for a ban on doing business with Chinese telecommunications giant Huawei. Trump's executive order does not specifically name any country or company, but U.S. officials have previously labeled Huawei a threat. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. Students and teachers in Brazil are on strike in defense of education. It is already being called the biggest protest so far against the government of Jair Bolsonaro. Across the country, demonstrators are holding marches, events, and occupying universities. They are rejecting the announcement of a 30% cut to the public education budget. The government says the measures are necessary and called Brazil's higher education sector a mess. The cuts could force the closure of dozens of teaching institutions across the country due to a lack of funds for basic necessities, including water and electricity. Our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Brian has more.
I'm standing on the plaza behind the Mas Art Museum in downtown Sao Paulo off of Paulista Avenue, where shortly what promises to be the largest protest since far-right President Jair Bolsonaro took office in January is about to kick off. Protests have started up across the country early this morning as students and teachers declared a general strike today against Bolsonaro's ultra-neoliberal cuts to the public education system, which are promising to kill academic research, to kill graduate scholarships, and to create 30% across the board cuts. These cuts are all completely unnecessary. Brazil has $360 billion in foreign reserves. It has $1 trillion in national reserves. There's no justification for these cuts except for the ideological factor. Bolsonaro is against higher learning. He doesn't want people to be intelligent, because if they get too smart, it's going to kill his base, a base of people with neo-fascist tendencies who believe in all of the fake news that him and his followers spread across Brazil. So the protests are about to get started, and it appears to be what's already promised to be a great day for the resistance against Bolsonaro here in Brazil.
We thank Brian Meir for that report. Moving on, members of the Guarani indigenous community in Ecuador have protested in Quito to demand that their rights be respected. Last month, a court ruled that the state violated the rights of indigenous communities because they weren't consulted about oil exploitation in their territories. But now, members of the Guarani indigenous community, which lives in the Amazon rainforest, are afraid the ruling might be overturned.
We, the women of Pastaza community, come to speak in favor of our right to life. We want to have clean water, clean forest, our living culture. We want to live happily in free space and without pollution. The grandparents, the ancestors of our culture, were defenders, jungle caretakers, and did not allow anyone to enter from any culture. They killed them with spears. We do not want to face the government to kill with spears, to threaten. We just come with a lot of respect to ask you to respect our rights. It is the only thing we come to say with all our heart, with all our soul, to respect our decisions and our lives.
Ecuador's Attorney General's office has formally accused former Vice President Maria Alejandra Vicuña of allegedly receiving bribes in return of jobs while she was a lawmaker. Ángel Sacbay, a former advisor of Vicuña, claimed that he worked for the former vice president in 2 different positions, and in order to get those jobs, he had to make a monthly payments of between $300 and $1,400 from 2011 to 2013 directly to Vicuña. Judge Ivan Saquicela will decide if this case goes to trial on May 21st. Vicuña has denied all accusations. An oversight committee of Ecuador's National Assembly has recommended that the former Foreign Minister María Fernández Espinosa face a vote of political censure by the full Assembly. Espinosa, who currently serves as President of the United Nations General Assembly, is accused of meddling with the naturalization process of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange in 2017. She is also accused of mishandling the situation of Ecuadorians living in Venezuela and the case of murdered journalists in northern Ecuador. And an Ecuadorian court has set a bail hearing for Swedish software developer Olavini. The details in this report from our correspondent in Quito, Denise Herrera.
Swedish digital activist Olavini is facing accusations by Ecuador's Attorney General for the crime of attacks against information systems. Recently, an Ecuadorian court ratified the preventive prison for Ola and rejected the substitute measures requested by his legal defense. This decision has been questioned by several organizations.
We are in favor of due process. Within this case, we think that the evidence presented by the police in a tweet, which was deleted, are absurd. There's no evidence for preventive prison. It affects not only to developers of free software or digital activists, but also for anyone with books, computers, and USBs being used as criminal evidence. We don't have much information in this case. This appears to be a case in which much information and evidence is missing.
Experts in defense of the use of free software and privacy have expressed that the prosecutor's decision has no support. They say that up until now there's been no word on which government systems were allegedly attacked by Ola. They also said that it is contradictory that a person like Ola, who defends privacy, will be accused of attacking information.
We don't develop software in order to steal information, or much less for hacking. There is a strong culture of hackers, sure, but it's not how people imagine it. They are not computer pirates, they are people who find disruptive solutions to existing problems.
Ola's legal defense team has confirmed that the bail hearing will be held on May 22. The attorney Carlos Soria stressed that Ecuadorian justice won't find a legal basis to deny the bail and release Ola.
The most concerning thing in the judge's decision was that if Ola is released accepting our petition, he could disappear or cause damage to the evidence for the investigation. And I ask myself, how could he destroy evidence when they already have all the evidence? There is no way. That is the level of judges we have now.
His legal defense team also pointed out that the government has said that they will ask for international help from the United States, Spain and Israel to analyze details of Ola Bini's life, both personally and professionally. Denise Herrera, Telesur, Ecuador.
Discussions between government and teachers in Barbados on the issue of school violence are to take place on Wednesday. The meeting was called by the Barbados Secondary Teachers Union, whose members had previously met to discuss the issue of student-on-teacher violence. Over 5 incidents of violence towards teachers have been recorded so far for the year. One of the recent incidents, which reached the magistrate's court, involved a 14-year-old couple who attacked a teacher over a cell phone battery. And 3 cabinet ministers in Guyana who resigned last month in accordance with a court ruling on their dual citizenship have been appointed to newly created positions within the ministries. The issue arose after last December's no-confidence vote against the government. The government appealed the vote, arguing that one of their members of parliament who voted with the opposition was illegal as he had dual citizenship with Canada. The High Court ruled that he breached the Constitution, and the Court of Appeal upheld the ruling. Greek billionaire and Coca-Cola bottling here Alki David has posted bail of $300,000 and reportedly left St. Kitts a day after he was arrested on drug charges. He allegedly smuggled $1.3 million worth of cannabis plants into the island. David said the transportation of the 5,000 plants was legal as he intended to develop a cannabis business in the region. It's yet to be seen whether cannabis will be legal on the island by the time David is scheduled to appear in court on September 23rd. Legislation is set to be passed in St. Kitts allowing its use for medical purposes. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. Malawi President Peter Mutharika has dissolved his cabinet ahead of presidential and parliamentary elections next week. This move is in line with the country's constitution that requires the cabinet to be disbanded ahead of the polls. The country will for the first time use the electronic voting system during the May 21st elections. Mutharika is facing 2 main opponents, his former vice president Saulus Chilama and former health minister Atupile Mulu. Sudan's military and protest leaders have agreed on a 3-year transition period to transfer power to a civilian government. This was announced at a joint press briefing by members of the Military Council and leaders of the opposition alliance, which led the protest that ousted former President Omar al-Bashir. A member of the Military Council said the final deal will be announced in the next 7 days. It will include the composition of the council, which will govern the country until elections are held.
We agreed on a transitional period of 3 years. The first 6 months of it will be allocated to sign agreements for peace and ending the war all over the country.
And meanwhile, the Military Council has also announced the formation of a committee to investigate a fatal attack on protesters by security forces on Monday. The committee will be made of members from both the military and the opposition alliance. 4 people, including a military police officer, died on Monday when members of the Rapid Support Force clashed with protesters who had set up barriers along a road near the military headquarters, where protesters have been camping since April 6th. Muslim communities in Ibo Island in Mozambique are struggling to observe the holy month of Ramadan in the aftermath of Cyclone Kenneth. The popular tourist destination has gone without large-scale food aid since the cyclone struck. About 7,000 people were trapped until World Food Program helicopters reached the island last Wednesday. People have fled the village either to shelter or a relative's home.
Very few people are attending prayers because they cannot go, as mosques were destroyed. As Muslims, we observe Ramadan, but there is no food to eat, and people are out and about. On Friday, there was no one because there is no wall at the mosque.
Palestinians are marking the 71st anniversary of Nakba, which means catastrophe in Arabic. It commemorates the expulsion of 1948 of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from their homes to create the State of Israel. The expulsions were carried out by invading. Zionist militias eventually left millions of Palestinians stateless. Israel has continued to expand its occupation in the West Bank and Jerusalem, with war crimes and human rights violations, making millions of Palestinian refugees unable to return home. Right now, the Great March of Return is taking place. Nearly 50 injuries have been reported so far. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.